Have you ever been so devastated that you felt like your heart was literally broken? Stay tuned to learn a 5-card spread to give you some clarity on the situation. Hi everybody, I'm Sue Ellen Clayton. Welcome to my channel where we're learning how to read tarot one card at a time. In today's video, we'll be using a 5-card spread to examine why someone is having chest pains. I will be using the Radiant Rider-Waite Tarot, and there is a link below. This question was posted anonymously online by someone who I will refer to as Lori. Her question was, why do I have chest pain all the time like I'm heartbroken? Lori did not mention using a spread, however, I will be using a 5-card mind-body connection spread to answer this question. Before I explain what this spread entails, I'd just like to make one comment. If you've got chest pains, please go to the doctor. I actually have some experience with this. A couple of weeks ago, I woke up with awful heartburn that was 10 out of 10 on the pain scale. I put it off as being heartburn and didn't think a lot of it. But the next morning I woke up and I still had heartburn and chest pains. That's when I decided to go to urgent care, where they determined that there was a greater than 50% chance that I'd had a heart attack and sent me directly to the emergency room. No, I did not go home first and do a tarot reading. I went directly to the hospital. Luckily, it turned out that I was fine. However, the doctor told me that women are far more likely than men to have atypical symptoms for heart attacks, including nausea, indigestion, fatigue, or jaw pain. We also have higher mortality rates because we delay seeking care. So please see a medical professional and not a tarot reader if you're having chest pains. Okay, my public service announcement is over. Let's have a look at the mind-body connection spread. Card number 1, Mental Block, describes how Lori's mental state is impacting her chest pain, and Lori pulled the 3 of Wands. Card number 2, Physical Manifestation, describes how Lori's physical state is impacting her chest pain, and Lori pulled the High Priestess. Card number 3, Emotional Link, describes how Lori's emotional state is impacting her chest pain, and Lori pulled Death. Card number 4, Spiritual Aspect, describes how Lori's spiritual state is impacting her chest pain, and Lori pulled the Emperor. And card number 5, Holistic Advice, gives Lori some overall advice for healing her chest pain, and Lori pulled the 3 of Swords. The first thing that jumps out in a reading about a broken heart is the 3 of Swords. We have another 3 at the beginning, the 3 of Wands, and the rest are major arcana cards. We have Death in the middle, which generally means rebirth or transformation, but it's still a scary card if we're talking about chest pain. All of the cards are upright. That may be significant, or it may mean that Lori doesn't like reading reversals. Let's get to card number 1, Mental Block, which describes Lori's mental state and how it's impacting her chest pain. And Lori pulled the 3 of Wands. Here we see Lori looking over the sea in front of her. One interpretation is that she's a merchant overlooking her fleet. I don't know much about the shipping business, but I imagine that it would be very stressful. There are a lot of moving parts, many of which we've heard about recently in the news, that include weather issues, security concerns, such as wars and piracy, supply chain disruptions, fluctuating fuel costs, and employee strikes. Then there's keeping track of the international, national, and local regulations, along with all the required documentation. And then there are accidents. Remember back in March 2021 when the Ever Given container ship got stuck in the Suez Canal? Before it got unstuck a week later, there were at least 369 ships queued up to pass through the canal, stranding almost $10 billion worth of trade. All of this is to say that I expect that work stress is playing a role in Lori's chest pain. Card number 2, Physical Manifestation, describes how Lori's physical state is impacting her chest pain, and Lori pulled the High Priestess. One thing I say pretty regularly when reading tarot spreads is that you can't move cards around. This is a case when I'd really like to move the High Priestess to a different location. This card is based on the female version of the Pope. She represents the unconscious mind, intuition, wisdom, and enlightenment. She's all about listening to your quiet inner voice and figuring out your soul's purpose. I prefer to see such a spiritual card in position number 4 about how Lori's spiritual state is impacting her chest pain. But it's not there, so I have to dig a bit deeper. One thing I notice about the High Priestess is her crown. The 3 moons on her crown represent the 3 phases of the moon: waxing, full, and waning. The moon controls natural cycles such as tides. It's also associated with physical cycles such as menstruation. So I'm guessing that Lori's hormones might have something to do with her chest pain. The other thing the crown can represent are the 3 phases of a woman's life: the maiden, which is being a virgin; the mother, which is adulthood; and the crone, which is old age. This can indicate that some of Lori's physical issues are associated with her stage in life. In terms of cardiac issues, younger women tend to suffer from congenital heart defects and issues like mitral valve prolapse. Middle-aged women tend to suffer from high blood pressure, as well as narrowing or blockages of their coronary arteries. And older women have higher incidences of high blood pressure, as well as heart attacks, strokes, and heart failure. So there are numerous physical causes that could explain Lori's chest pain, depending on her age. Card number 3, Emotional Link, describes how Lori's emotional state is impacting her chest pain, and Lori pulled Death. So now we're at the Death card. I think there's a lot of ways that we can relate this to her chest pain. She talks about being heartbroken, and she could have experienced the death of a loved one. There is a real condition called broken heart syndrome that actually mimics a heart attack and usually occurs as a result of extreme emotional stress, such as the death of a loved one. I've actually known a couple of people who've had this. It's caused by the release of stress hormones and, although serious and potentially life-threatening, generally gets better with appropriate medical intervention. So I feel like Lori has experienced some intense loss recently, either the death of someone close to her or perhaps the ending of an important relationship. Card number 4, Spiritual Aspect, describes how Lori's spiritual state is impacting her chest pain, and Lori pulled the Emperor. This is another card that I like to move elsewhere. The Emperor doesn't have a reputation as a particularly spiritual card. He wears a yellow crown, which is a symbol of power. This fully covers the top of his head, which is his crown chakra, and indicates that he does not rely on spirit for help. He is self-reliant and in charge. The power belongs to him and nobody else. The Emperor is a good leader. He's all about law and order, masculinity, and authority. So once again, we have to dig deep for the meaning of this card. I think it indicates that Lori grew up with a very omnipotent, patriarchal view of God. I feel like this is the God I learned about in Sunday school during my heavily Christian upbringing. He was an older man with a white beard, sitting on a throne, and he ruled with unlimited power. If you've suffered a loss, this is a hard view of God to accept. At least it was for me. It doesn't answer questions like, why did God let my kid get killed by a car? Why doesn't God fix war and famine? Why does God allow the polar ice cap to melt so that polar bears die? Why does God not make the U.S. Congress ban assault weapons? So I think that Lori has either lost her faith or that she is struggling to figure out why God let these bad things happen to her. And those feelings of anger and grief are contributing to her chest pain. And card number 5, Holistic Advice, gives Lori some overall advice for healing her chest pain. And Lori pulled the 3 of Swords, a card that says you are experiencing heartbreak, sorrow, sadness, or loss. Your heart has been wounded. This might be any or all of the ways we've discussed in this reading, mentally, physically, emotionally, and or spiritually. Let's talk for a moment about the symbolism in the 3 of Swords. The red in the heart can represent health, vitality, love, and passion. The heart is seen as the center of our emotions. Think about Valentine's Day. As far back as preschool, we're making red hearts to signify love. When we lose someone we love, we speak of our heart being broken. The heart can also represent anger, jealousy, fear, and envy. Our hearts are also the center of our circulatory system and carry blood to and from all parts of our body. There's a reason this card didn't show swords piercing our toe. Our heart is hugely significant physically and emotionally. And here we have our heart being pierced not just once, but 3 times. The 3 swords can represent your body, mind, and spirit, so basically all parts of you have been deeply hurt by this experience. It can also represent overkill. It might be easy to recover from 1 wound, but 3 wounds is a lot harder. The sword has 2 blades. Most of the sword is a cold blue color, which represents that it is about cold, unyielding facts. The white portion of the sword represents purity and purification, and the rest of the card is gray. Gray is a dull, depressing color. Gray, cloudy days do nothing to lift our moods. Gray is 1 step above black that represents depression, sadness, and mourning. The water in the rain represents emotions and tears. So what is the advice here? I think the 3 of Swords is telling Lori that her heart is very complex and has been very wounded. This will not be a quick fix. She needs help and a multidimensional approach. She needs to look at things holistically and answer questions such as, mentally, is her stress contributing to her heart pain? What can Lori do to reduce her stress at work or learn to cope with it better? Does she need to change jobs or learn coping skills such as meditation? Physically, is there a physical cause of her heart pain? Does she need to see a doctor to look at her hormones or other physical problems? Emotionally, is she grieving the loss of a relationship that ended or someone who passed away? Can she benefit from seeing a counselor or attending a bereavement group? And spiritually, is her religion helping or hurting her at this time in her life? Does she need to re-examine her belief in God or to find a new spiritual center in her life? I hope that this video gave you some ideas that you can apply to your tarot practice. Please leave a comment if you'd like to share what you've learned. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.